How's it going, guys? Welcome back to the latest installment of the Ultimate Killer Guides. Today we are going to be talking about the brand new spooky queen, the Onryo. Now, even though she is very new to the game, I have been grinding her so much, both on the live servers and back on the PTB, and I absolutely adore this killer. Now, even though she isn't the strongest killer in the roster, she is unbelievably satisfying to play, and just a ton of fun at the same time. But she also does have some pretty decent potential, if you know how to use her and her power effectively. So, with that, we're going to be covering the Onryo's powering kit, her perks, her add-ons, tips and tricks, and finally how to counter her as a survivor. So, insert the VHS tape, don't answer the phone, and let's crack straight on with the Ultimate Onryo Guide. Now, starting with her power and her kit, the Onryo is actually the smallest killer in the game and the only one that is considered a small killer. She has a normal base speed of 115%, but she actually has a reduced base terror radius of only 24 meters instead of the normal 32. Now, the Onryo's power is called Deluge of Fear, whatever it is, and this is comprised of 3 special abilities. Her first special ability is Manifestation. The Onryo will start the trial manifested, which means that she will have no terror radius and no red stain, and be invisible to survivors outside of a 24 meter radius. To attack survivors, the Onryo must manifest herself, and once completed she will gain her terror radius, her red stain, and is able to hit and injure survivors until you choose to demanifest again. Her second ability is Projection. Throughout the trial are scattered TVs that the Onryo can also take material form by travelling through these when demanifested. You will also receive a short sprint burst when exiting a TV, as well as any survivors within a 16 meter radius of you when you exit will also gain condemned progress. And that links into her final special ability, Condemned. Survivors can walk up to any TVs that are scattered across the map and retrieve the VHS tape, which will also turn that TV off temporarily and stop the Onryo from being able to teleport to it for a short duration of time. Any TV that survivors interact with will also gain something called Condemned, which is a new state added with this chapter, with the VHS tape also passively adding to this condemned state as well. When survivors grab a VHS tape, there will be a TV that is highlighted in white and the survivors will receive a loud noise notification. Once they interact with this TV with their tape, some of their condemned progress will be removed. If the survivor chooses to ignore the condemned state and the bar fully fills, the Onryo will receive Killer Instinct showing their location for 6 seconds, as well as giving her the power to instantly mori the survivor once downed with her Exhonorable Stare and get them out of the game regardless of how many times they've been hooked. Now, I know that can be quite a lot to take in, but honestly it is pretty easy to pick up once you've actually played as and against her. But summed up, Onryo can teleport to TVs scattered across the map, survivors can turn them off at a cost of being condemned a little bit more, and if they turn off too many or don't cleanse themselves of this affliction, they will be moriable once they reach 7 stacks. So with her base out of the way, let us move on to her perks. Now, to begin with, the Onryo comes with 3 teachable perks. Her first perk being Scourge Hook Floods of Rage. At the start of the trial, 4 random hooks will be turned into Scourge Hooks. Once a survivor has been unhooked from one of these Scourge Hooks, the auras of all survivors will be revealed to you for up to 7 seconds. Think of this as a sort of reverse barbecue and chili. This perk honestly has a lot of potential for information, and this perk has actually been incredible for sometimes allowing me to keep out of sight and mind game survivors during a chase in order to get the hit or down, but it also works brilliantly just as an information perk alone. Her second perk is Call of Brine. After damaging a generator, Call of Brine will activate for 60 seconds. The generator then regresses up to 200% speed and its aura is revealed to you. On top of that, every time a survivor completes a good skill check on this generator within those 60 seconds, you will receive a loud noise notification. It's honestly another fantastic perk and probably my favourite out of the 3. It also has a lot of great potential, especially if paired with Pop Goes the Weasel for some incredible gen regress speeds and more information. Her final perk is called Merciless Storm. When a generator is repaired to 90%, survivors are faced with continuous skill checks. If they miss a skill check or stop repairing the generator, the entity will block off the generator for up to 20 seconds. Merciless Storm cannot affect the same generator twice. Again, another decent perk, with some decent potential depending on what killer you play and what other perks you kind of have to back this up as well. It definitely needs some help to make it viable with other perks and as lethal as possible, but it is honestly still a decent perk if you have nothing else just to help with generators. Now I'm going to be recommending 4 different builds for 4 different playstyles. So for high MMR players or for veterans of Killer, run Call of Brine, Pop Goes the Weasel, Barbecue and Chili, and play with your food. After hooking a survivor, teleport to the most repaired generator or to a survivor location with barbecue and chili, and instantly either regress the generator by a considerable chunk or get into another chase as soon as possible and keep the pressure up. Then use play with your food to gain stacks and become even more lethal in the chase, which sometimes the Onryo can struggle with depending on how you play her. Bamboozle is also a decent perk to swap with play with your food to shut down strong loops and tiles, but if you use your manifestation correctly and mind game and you know when to potentially give up a chase, I would say you have more luck with play with your food. Now the next is for low MMR players or for new killers that don't have a lot of perks options available yet. All you want to do is you want to run Sloppy Butcher, Scourge Hook, Floods of Rage, Call of Brine, and Fearmonger. Sloppy Butcher can really punish survivors and keep them injured as long as possible, which is fantastic for the Onryo as she has a lot of hit and run potential, and keeping survivors injured also helps make this more viable. Call of Brine is amazing for gen regressing information as I previously said, and Floods of Rage is great for survivor information. Then Fearmonger on top of that so that when you teleport, survivors are able to use exhaustion perks straight away and it allows you to get up close and get those hits a lot easier. The next is a fantastic hit and run build. You'll want to run Sloppy Butcher, Call of Brine, Deadlock and Tinkerer. As previously said, Sloppy is a great way to keep survivors injured, making this build much more viable. Call of Brine again for great gen regression as well as fantastic information in regards to when you could potentially return to that generator and get another hit or get the down. Deadlock is great to keep gen progress at a steady pace and keep it to a minimum, making sure that you have enough time to dash around the map and add pressure and keep survivors on their toes. And then finally Tinkerer for more great information on gen progress, just to pressure and for extra survivor locations as well. To be honest, there are a lot of different builds that kind of revolve around the hit and run playstyle that she can present, but I've currently found that this one for me so far has been the most reliable. And finally, for a super duper quick and oppressive Onryo, run the Bloody Fingernail and the Mother's Combs add-ons, which I'll explain what they do in a little bit more detail in the next section, but then also run Make Your Choice, Play with Your Food, Pop Goes the Weasel, and Corrupt Intervention. Make Your Choice is fantastic on the Onryo, as if survivors don't turn off TVs that are next to hook survivors, the second you hear them scream, you can immediately teleport, and then mix with the Bloody Fingernails and potentially a couple of stacks of Play with Your Food, immediately rush that survivor who rescued and get a free recycle on the hook. Then keep gen progress slow and steady with Corrupt Intervention and Pop Goes the Weasel, and then with the Mother's Comb for extra survivor information as well, and knowing where to push if you're out of a chase. I'll also actually be making a video on this build very soon, as I have found this absolutely lethal and not many survivors expect this whatsoever, so please look forward to this in the future, it should be a good one. But next is going to be her add-ons. Now there's a bit to get through, but the first add-on that I want to highlight is the one that myself and a lot of other people across the board have decided that this is probably her best, and that add-on is the Bloody Fingernails. This makes it so that the speed burst you get whilst exiting a TV is increased by 50%. This add-on alone has been the sole reason I have got a lot of surprise hits on survivors once I've teleported. My advice is to try and save a lot of these if you can with the Blood Web, as they make her much more viable at high rank gameplay. Another fantastic add-on for her is the tape editing deck, which makes all survivors start the trial with VHS tapes in their hand, making it so that they will immediately start gaining condemned, forcing them to go to TVs more at the start of the game and keeping them off the generators, since that the TVs that they need to use to remove the condemned will also be the furthest away from the respawn point. Distorted photo reveals survivors that witness a manifestation within 16 meters of the killer and makes them scream, which can be quite nice for the occasional bit of information that you wouldn't normally get, another viable one. Now the Mother's Comb is actually another personal favourite of mine, and it reveals the aura of any turned off TV in yellow, meaning if you keep an eye on your TVs, it can be great information to know where potential survivors could be if you didn't teleport through that TV yourself. VCR makes it so that all the TVs play the projection effects when the Onryo decides to teleport, which is another great one for keeping survivors on their toes. The ring drawing allows condemned to spread when survivors heal, which is fantastic for her hit and run playstyle and keeping survivors off generators if they are holding a tape. and as well as the iridescent videotape itself, which turns on the last 4 TVs that have been turned off when you hit a survivor within 8 seconds after manifesting. A great add-on to keep map pressure at its absolute best and keep your coverage as best as possible. And honestly, any other add-ons that kind of mess with the Sadako's visibility and duration of her manifestation can also be really great to keep your mind game potential higher than normal. Honestly, Sadako has some pretty decent add-ons in her kit, and I think all of them add to her playstyle for the best in some way or another. But the ones I've listed above are definitely my favourites as she has right now, and I'd say my top 3 are Bloody Fingernails, Tape Editing Deck, and the Iridescent Videotape. But explore and experiment to see what works for you and your playstyle the best. Now it's time to cover her tips and tricks. With this information, hopefully you'll be able to get the most out of your Onryo gameplay and play her to the highest standard possible. Firstly, I want to mention the condemned effect. Now, if you expect to get constant Moris with this, you are going to be disappointed. It is a great extra little way to keep survivors off generators, but it very, very rarely will result in fully condemned survivors, as it is very easy to get rid of. And survivors would pretty much have to go out of their way to get fully condemned. It's definitely the weakest aspect of her power, so don't depend on it too much or think too highly of it, as it could result in a bit of poorer gameplay, but it is decent for slowing the game progress down a little bit. Now for my first proper tip, it's going to be that the TVs will always spawn in the same place on every map, so get used to where they spawn and get used to using them effectively within a chase and with map coverage so that you can make the most out of them. Next, whilst demanifested, you will have no collisions with survivors, so if somebody's trying to take a protection hit, simply demanifest, walk through them, and chase the survivor that you wanted to originally. However, this also does make it extremely tricky to trap survivors, so don't expect to do that too much. Next is the Onryo's height. As I said, she is the only killer in the game that is considered a small killer, and yeah, not even Hag is classed as small. This is actually quite fantastic for the most part, as it allows you to mind game a lot of loops better and make it so that if you play well, the survivors will have a very difficult time knowing which side you're coming in for the attack, making it very difficult to potentially counter, so use her height to your advantage. Also, get used to using the TVs within a chase against unsuspecting survivors. Being able to teleport mid-chase and repositioning yourself for a surprise hit on the survivors can be so beneficial, but it will take a little bit of time and practice to use effectively, but please don't be afraid to try. This can result in so many free hits when survivors just keep looking behind them, not knowing where you are, and then you slap them in the face whilst they run straight into you. Now, her manifestation is actually an incredible tool to use against survivors in a chase, and to keep your mind games at an absolute maximum. Not having a red stain and seeing you intermittently can be really essential to downing survivors who maybe aren't paying attention properly, or even if they are, sometimes resulting in a very easy hit or down anyway. However, don't over-rely on it and hurt yourself in the process by trying to mind game something that could have been a very fairly easy free hit. When hooking survivors, try to hook them close to a TV that is turned on. That way, if a survivor chooses to unhook before turning it off, that way you are instantly able to teleport there and pressure the survivors again. Also, be careful when lunging as the Onryo. The fact that she is the only killer that doesn't actually use weapons or her fists as an attack in the game, sometimes it can be a little bit iffy as you may not hit survivors that you expected to hit at your certain range. However, a simple fix to this, if you can, just try and get a little bit closer to the survivors so that this doesn't take you by surprise and just make you unnecessarily whiff them. Now, it's no secret and it's obvious as hell, but the Onryo's biggest weaknesses are loops. She doesn't really have anything in her roster to help the looping situations other than the manifesting mind games, so be careful being chased to certain tiles, like low walls or shack. Either be incredibly aggressive to make them use the pallet as soon as possible, or to simply teleport away and come back to them when they are in a much more vulnerable position, so definitely be careful where you chase. You are also able to attack instantly after your manifestation bar is full. There is no activation cooldown, so if possible, hit the second you are able to. As to survivors, you'll still be in the process of phasing in between these states, and this hit can take a lot of survivors by surprise if they haven't realised you've actually manifested yet. Now, of course, using TVs to teleport is going to be crucial to her gameplay and her pressure, but you also may have to be a touch reserved about which TVs that you use and how often you use them. Not having access to a TV at a crucial point can be really hurting to the Onryo in the longer run. Say next to a hook survivor or near a completed generator, you'll want the option to teleport to it if need be. Now, this will take some time to get used to, of course, but sometimes not using them can actually be more beneficial in the long run. It is a tricky one to judge, but as I said, that will just come with time. Now, this last tip, it may not be too consistent, but I still think it is worth mentioning, as I have had some results with this from time to time. But if you shake your character's head up and down very rapidly whilst pretending to manifest, you can actually bait survivors dead hards out of sheer panic and then hit them for an easy down, as the Onryo's rapid movement may look like an attempted swing to the survivors if they get caught off guard. As I said, it's not 100% consistent, but maybe worth thinking about from time to time, especially if you know that a survivor has it ready to use. And I think that's it for now. If I recommend or think about any additional tips, I will leave them in the pinned comment section below, so make sure to check that just in case I've got a little bit more advice for you in there. But on a whole, I can't remember the last time I enjoyed a DLC this much. I instantly fell in love with this killer, and even though she isn't the strongest, she is super fun to use. She's smooth as butter to play, and her animations are probably the cleanest of any killer in the game. I would highly recommend her. But now for all you survivors out there, it is time to discuss how to counter her, so that if you want to put up a better fight against the Onryo, this is how you can do that. Firstly, as I said in the Onryo's tips and tricks herself, that the TVs spawn in the same place on every map. So also get used to this as survivor, so that you know where to expect her and how to avoid her depending on if she's chasing you directly or trying to mind game you with a potential mid-chase teleport. Now, with Condemned and turning off TVs, I would recommend at the start of the game to not focus at all on the TVs, as this can potentially waste a lot of your time, especially if you're a confident looper. Time which could be much better spent on just cracking out on the gens while she tries to protect the entire map, with the slight negative that Sadako can probably use them against you. But even if she does, just run her as best as you can whilst the other survivors then crack on with the gens whilst you're in the chase. However, mid-game and especially late game, start turning off TVs near generators and such, as she can get some immense pressure from this, and especially if a survivor or two is dead or hooked, it will be much harder for you to get this pressure back. So early game, don't turn off TVs. Mid games, now and again. Late game, if you're working on a generator, turn off the TV so that she cannot use it against you. Now for the chaser, try to take the Onryo to either long loops with low walls or very complex loops such as the shack, as this will make it so that you can see her trying to manifest against you and be able to counter it with the vault or a pallet drop, and it will be so much better at wasting her time while she's reduced to a basic M1 killer. She is weakest in the loops. Also, when you can, try to turn off TVs in high traffic areas or hotspots such as hook survivors, as the last thing that you want is to unhook a survivor and immediately be in the chase with the Onryo, or worse, for her to start going after the survivor that you have just unhooked. And finally, the sweet spot for getting rid of your condemned meter, I would say, is about 3 or 4 stacks. At this level, it is best to try and get rid of your condemned a little bit, but it also makes it so that you're not wasting your time and overusing your condemned meters, whilst also making sure that you're using it as efficiently as possible. But if she also has the ring drawing add-on that increases it with healing, I'd say maybe 2 to 3 would then be the new sweet spot for that one. But guys, that's pretty much it. I really hope you enjoyed this and you're able to take away something from this to improve your Sadako gameplay or improve your fight against this spooky bitch. Now, if you did enjoy it and it did help, please consider liking and subscribing. It really helps me out, and as currently this is my 7th installment of the Ultimate franchise, so don't forget to check out some of my other guides on other killers that I've done as well. And finally, if you have any tips or tricks yourself with playing as her or against her, please leave them in the comments below so that we can get also potentially a nice decent pool together of extra tips so that people are properly prepared to play as and against her. But as always, thank you all so much for watching. I really do appreciate it, and I look forward to seeing you all in the next video. Thanks again, take care, bye bye for now.